The Nuts and Bolts of Writing, Season 2, a podcast where we talk about literature, the ins and outs of writing, and how to actually start writing. Hey there, everybody. This is Tete DePunk, one of the co hosts of the Nuts and Bolts of Writing. Today it's just me, Tete, reviewing the recent Spider-Man movie, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. A colorful, bold, and heartfelt sequel to the innovative 2018 Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Across the Spider-Verse surpassed its predecessor in terms of pushing the boundaries with animation, sound design, and pacing. Despite being an hour longer than its prequel, Across the Spider-Verse excelled in its pacing. It covered a layered story, starting and concluding with a poignant yet satisfying arc with Spider-Gwen. The movie also introduced, like Into the Spider-Verse, several fascinating characters with striking personalities and unique animation designs. But where the movie really made impact was its emotional clarity and ideological conflict. The movie also introduced an intimidating opponent to Miles Morales in the character of Spider-Man 2099, Miguel O'Hara. So let's dive into a quick review. Key points. For example, Gwen's arc. Gwen's arc formed very satisfying, especially her reconciliation with her father. As someone who shared a close, if complicated and conflicted relationship with my dad, seeing Gwen reconciled with her dad, admit her own uncertainties, and come to terms with their tense relationships. For example, she struggled to reveal her true self, wanted to wear her mask and do good, just like her dad wears the badge. This certainly hit the one nerve in your girl Tete. For example, another example, those two scenes where Gwen embraces her dad, boy, did it hit hard. As someone who was constantly affectionate and hugging her dad, this still really pierces my heart. When the world fades to white, it's the expression of safety, security, and that validation that all is well and you're on the right track. It reminds me whenever Dad and I would reconcile, we would hug one another, and the world in that moment felt blank in the safest, warmest way possible. It's very hard to convey that feeling. Maybe a lot of you understand that. And the world makes sense at that point. It seems clear. Life is clear. This year, I lost my dad, and this year, as I embraced my dad for the last time, as the stroke and heart attacks took him, um, he was paralyzed from the strokes. He couldn't lift his arms, much to embrace, but I knew he embraced me in spirit. The world didn't feel blank nor light, nor did anything seem clear. Everything seemed to fade, as he did too that day. But as I watched that scene between Gwen and her dad, I knew only too well the power of those kind of embraces. They are more than signs of affection, they're statements. They're markers made indelible in that uniquely nameless and intangible part of us we deem the soul. They're immortalized in memory and impart an important formation of how we build our own selves, but also how we mean to others. And I didn't originally plan to see this movie. And maybe this was an affirmation from my dad. And maybe this was his way of reconciling more officially. Maybe an apology beyond the grave, if you will. An apology for the past we shared. Whatever it was, I felt a warmth radiate through me seeing this scene. And that shows what the power of good storytelling can do. When you have that kind of sincerity, it's really amazing what it does. And also, too, I think it touched on a lot of things, too. Gwen is lonely. She's also rebellious, cynical. But, at the same time, she's not jaded or heartless. She has a lot of concern and focus for others. Um, she wants to connect, and she's so wanting to find that group, that family, that place to belong. And this is, of course, why she joins, Miguel's strike force. And, um, I think we all have it within ourselves. We all want to find our own band, and sometimes we can't find it. We have to form it ourselves. And sometimes it'll be from the most unlikely motley crew, as Gwen puts together a motley crew to save Miles. So, speaking of which, we have another character who made quite an impact, the introduction of the opponent, Miguel O'Hara. And Miguel O'Hara's introduction packed quite the punch. Epic, but without going overboard, like unfortunately some Marvel properties do. Cough, cough. Note to self: don't let Disney grab its corporate paws on a property. Um, but anyway, Miguel embodied a dark somberness mixed with a threatening rage. Definitely not a standard Spider-Man, as as Peter P. Parker pointed out his lack of humor. But Miguel definitely is an authoritative anomaly of a multiverse held together by mere, well, pun intended, spider webs. It was the ideal rhythm, much like a perfected passe doble done in halftime. Perhaps Miguel discovers in the next in the next sequel, Beyond the Spider Verse. Maybe he'll discover that he's the actual anomaly in the Spider Verse, rather than accuse Miles. It's also really good. I want to say that with Miguel's character, that he goes against the grain of a lot of Latino dad stereotypes. He defies that stereotype of the bumbling, absent, or disagreeably weak or distant father. We can definitely see in a very painful flashback that he was very dedicated to his daughter. I mean, he was even manipulating dimensions to either save himself so he could be with his daughter, or sadder still, to find a dimension where she survives. And in the moment where he's in this dimension and he's holding his daughter and she just kind of evaporates because of that dimension's existence, um, collapsing or being corrupted, it's just heartbreaking. Like it's only like, maybe it's like a 5-second clip, but it does so well to impart that sense of sadness and loss, but that it really hardens this man into what he is. Miguel also challenges other stereotypes, particularly of Latino masculinity. So usually Latino masculinity in a lot of media, especially American media, is often stereotyped as playful, flirty, unfocused, and, how, for lack of a better word, just directionless, no direction. Miguel, as mentioned, embodies a dominating gravity. His focus is extremely heavy, it's laser sharp, and he shows a certain drive that often eludes many Western or US depictions of male characters of Latino ethnicity. It was also good to see the Latino representation beyond the lighthearted, the flirty, or, pardon my French, the bitchy types. Miguel brought a certain and very shocking pathos to the story, but also challenged stereotypes. Yes, absolutely, sure, this is an epic sci fi superhero story, but it was good to see the writers and creators didn't meld Miguel into a sexy, flirty, hot blooded Latin lover type. If anything, Miguel embodies a unique darkness and edge that is not the run of the mill edge lord rubbish, but a painful gravitas accepting fatalism. His fatalism was dark, and this was pretty dark for a work meant for a younger audience. But honestly, this trilogy so far has not been overly light, and it goes beyond the young people's fare of witty humor and cliche. Also, mad props to Oscar Isaac for stealing the show with his voice acting. He brought a pinch of, Spanish lingua zest, but no corny accent. He also radiated that dark energy and volatile rage in perfect tempo with the animation. Amazing. Also, note to the audience, if any of you guys can find bootlegs of Oscar Isaac's performance as Hamlet, please share them. I want to see that. I'd love to see him do Shakespeare. Also, note to Oscar Isaac, if he magically finds this podcast or his agent, consider doing one of Shakespeare's Richard. You can either do one, two or three. You would totally knock it out of the park, Oscar. I also wanted to get to the other characters. For example, this is kind of the strength of the Spider Verse itself. The Spider Verse introduces a very wonderful and colorful motley crew of very lovable characters. For example, in its predecessor, we saw, very interesting characters such as Penny. We had the introduction of very, humorous, cartoony ones that we grew to love, like Spider Ham. And of course, something really stylish and, debonair, like Spider Noir, who is definitely one of my top favorite Spider-Man. I just love Spider Noir. I recently got into the comics, read them online, because they're hard to find physically. And although the comics have some questionable elements, I gotta love it. Gotta love Spider Noir. Just peak perfection, in terms of many other aspects. But however, so Spider Verse's strength is the fact that you have very strong supporting cast. You have incredible leads, but you also have a strong supporting cast, which is not really the case for a lot of films. Most notably, animated films or something that's based on, say, a franchise. Although I will say that when it comes to cast unity, Marvel does do a better job of handling a cast. Like I've always said, if I had to choose, X-Men, of course, top tier, but if I had to like really choose, like someone said, who do you want, Avengers or Justice League? I'm totally going with the Avengers. Even though they're wildly different, they work together. Justice League does not. Um, the Justice League does not work at all. I mean, it's like 5 minutes and there's already drama, whether it's, Wonder Woman saying, I'm going to do my own thing, or whether it's just Clark and Bruce at it. I mean, they will always be at it. I mean, this is nothing new. But anyway, getting back on track, um, that is the strength of the Spider Verse. That you have these very strong surrounding cast. So two of the characters that really made an entrance and definitely became, instant fan favorites were Hobie Brown and Pavitar. I'm going to mispronounce his name, Prabhakabar. Yes, I mean, people come after me if I did pronounce that wrong. I do apologize. I've tried to imitate it how he said it in the movie, but I still cannot do it. But without further ado, Hobby and Pavatar radiated with these uniquely striking designs and refreshing charisma. These two characters are a great example of not only animation being pushed beyond its boundaries in terms of style and texture, but also a master study of how to make an instantly memorable character, even for secondary characters in a large, varied cast. Pavitar, for example, is a really great example of how to introduce a character from another culture. There's care in showing Pavitar's culture, his home, but without resorting to stereotypes or flashy window dressing for the audience. And I do appreciate that, and then they consulted, if you look behind the scenes, some of the voice actors, what would they say, that nothing is hackneyed or stereotyped, and just, but at the same time, it's very vivid, it's very distinct. um I really enjoyed the scene in Manhattan, which was like a mix of New York City and Bombay, Mumbai, I should say, to use the proper name. And it was just so vibrant, beautifully done, but it was nicely melded. This was definitely a lot more successful than, say, um, with say San Francisco, if I pronounced that right, from Big Hero 6, which I felt wasn't a good, it's a subjective opinion. I didn't personally feel like that combination of San Francisco and Tokyo worked really well, but Manhattan definitely worked. Good advice for people who are trying to blend world building like that. Then we get to Hobie. Hobie was absolutely awesome. I mean, from that loud guitar riff, he just bursts onto the scene. And I love, and this is coming from a scrapbooking nut and a poster nut, he just embodied that perfect punk spirit. I mean, I was almost expecting, Hobie to like burst into the Clash or the Smiths, but Hobie's bold entrance is the perfect example of how to introduce an instantaneously charismatic character. He absolutely brims with bravado. It's very sincere. But there's also heart as well as mind. Hobie is absolutely sincerity. He is not afraid to, you know, admit his disinterest into, like, say, Miguel's bigger scheme. And you know what? He's a subtle rebel. Like, he doesn't come out right to do it, but right in the end where he says, as for the record, I quit now. Just perfect rebel. The perfect embodiment of what a punk should be. And Hobie's very aware of his world and situation. And props to Hobie for openly admitting that he wants to take down uh, fascists. Gotta love Hobie. But you know what? There's also this wonderful foreshadowing with him. It's a perfect foreshadowing of what's to come in the thrilling anticlimax of the movie, because the movie does end on an anticlimax conclusion. It's not even, it's an inclusion, if you will, inconclusive. But Hobie's subtle actions provide a crucial layer to the plot. From fashioning a dimensional shifting device for Gwen, I forgot the name of the watch thing that everyone has. Or, for example, Hobie also gives Miles a seemingly trivial tip, which becomes a crucial turning point later in the movie's plot. Um, you would not see that coming until you see it happen. And that in itself is good suspense. That's good pacing there. Hobie embodies the dynamic of strong characterization. Even if a character is on screen for several minutes, with good writing, they can act as the linchpin to a plot and make a story's world all the more memorable. But we've talked about everyone else except Miles. Miles is definitely into his own. Miles is getting used to taking on the mantle as his version of, his world's version of Spider-Man. But at the same time, he's also encountering his own journey, if you will. Um, he's going through his own arc. He is going to go to college, and with his top grades, minus that being Spanish. But I feel your pain, Miles, as somebody who also has a Latino mother. My Spanish is also poor. In fact, I'll say that Miles is probably an expert compared to me in terms of linguistic comprehension. Sorry, Ma. you know Sorry, Mama, I didn't do well. I can read it, but I can't speak it. I can sing it, but I can't speak it. um but Miles does have this opportunity to go to Princeton, and this is something for his parents to contend with, to let go. And this is something I love, this reoccurring theme in the movie, the thing of connection with parents, understanding. um and these are always beautifully done in the Spider-Verse. And I'm really impressed that they carried this on and maybe surpassed it. Especially since we have more of his mother's involvement as well, and she's more accepting. She's more in tune with Miles. I feel like Miles really embodies a lot of qualities from her as well. And you can see that. And I think it's wonderful. It's good to have positive son and mother relationships. Um, Miles also has a pretty strong relationship with his dad. I think sometimes there's a bit of, like, disjoint, but it's mostly from Miles taking on this role and not sharing it with his dad, not sharing it with any, his parents, period. But basically, Miles is going through a realization of what the role means. He has a few faux pas, if you will, um, especially concerning the creation of one villain, the Spot. And the Spot's a pretty interesting villain because he has nothing to lose, so he will bring down the world with him, just to prove a point. Because if you have nothing to lose, what else do you live for but to prove a point and take down the whole world with you? So, pretty, and I appreciate the continuity from the predecessor. Spot was one of the scientists that was present when the collider was there, and as a result, he was pretty much there when it blew up, and it made him possibly to go to every dimension, including a really cool sequence with Legos, which was done by this really amazing animator who's only 14 years old. He is on YouTube. we'll probably link to that because that's impressive, very impressive. But returning to Miles' arc, Miles is going through a lot of self realization. There's this painful uncertainty. And it was refreshing to see that explored in a movie. But also at the same time, you know what? He loves his parents and he's close with his parents. And it's good to see that. And it's good to see, too, that his parents want to understand. I think I like the fact that, it's not vilifying the parents, it's not making them the major opponents. They want to help, they just need to understand. Um, and sometimes maybe that is maybe our fault. Sometimes maybe we're not communicating in a way they understand, or however. But this is beautifully done. I love how parental relationships were handled. I certainly appreciate how so many of the elements came together. Like I said, animation, visuals, sound design, the music's amazing. Absolutely love Spider-Gwen's theme. It is so wonderful. And Miguel O'Hara's theme, oh my gosh, this seems to be a theme for the summer. Miguel O'Hara's theme reminds me a little bit of the loud, brassy section in the opera Oppenheimer theme, especially the part where it's "Can you hear the music?" or the Destroyer of Worlds part. But I haven't seen Oppenheimer yet. But that once I do, I will review that for you guys. Hopefully, it will be good. Um, but yes, Spider Man Across the Spider Verse was an excellent film. It pushed the boundaries of animation and storytelling, and I love how it respected its younger audience by making it so accessible for all audiences. This is definitely one animated film I would recommend to watch as an adult. You may even appreciate it better as an adult when you have, kind of grown out of the painful adolescence and you kind of realize what your parents have gone through and what you went through with your parents. And it makes you have a better appreciation for that. If you have had that experience, if you haven't, then maybe you can appreciate that, despite being healthy, sometimes there will be challenges in a relationship and you have to overcome those. But I am eager to see beyond the Spider Verse. I hope Miles is okay. I am worried about Miles right now because he is in a dimension. Spoiler alert. Do you want spoilers? Okay, I won't give spoilers, but let's just say Miles is in danger, and Gwen, you better get the crew to save him. I mean, she's got a good crew now. I mean, she's got a whole gang back, so we are good to rock and roll with the sequel, and I cannot wait to see Beyond the Spider Verse. So this is your girl Tete. If you haven't seen the movie, you should. Hopefully, you can stream it pretty soon. I don't know if it's still playing anymore, but it was an awesome movie. Bold, beautiful, colorful, and emotionally clear. That is my review for Spider Man Across the Spider Verse 2023. I hope you guys all have a great summer and stay golden and listen for the next episode.